You know, what I worry about, to the extent that we have some who do not take the position or are unwilling to follow it, may create further problems. For example, the banking industry is not willing to provide services to state-authorized marijuana dispensaries. They fear they may be violating federal money laundering laws. So then they start operating as a cash-only business, no access to bank accounts or credit card transactions. That's a prescription for problems, tax evasion, and so on. And we're hearing that the DEA agents, and what seems to me like a significant step away from reality, are instructing armored car companies to cease providing services to marijuana dispensaries, almost as if they're saying, yeah, get out there so we can have some robberies. Now, I'm sure it's not stated that way, and maybe sometimes, whether it's DEA or anything else, bureaucracy trumps reality, as it has in this case, but it creates a problem. So what's the department going to do to address these concerns? What sort of guidance are you giving to states about these banking and tax issues?
Chairman Leahy, as far as the banking issue is concerned, we agree it is an issue that we need to deal with. When the Attorney General talked to the governors of Washington and Colorado, they raised the same issue, and others have raised the same issue. Obviously, there is a public safety concern when businesses have a lot of cash sitting around. There is a tendency that there's guns associated with that, so it's important to deal with that kind of issue. And we're at the present time talking with FinCEN, and they're talking with and bringing in bank regulators to discuss ways that this could be dealt with in accordance with the laws that we have on the books today.
You may want to talk with DEA, too.
As far as DEA is concerned, Mr. Chairman, I certainly had heard about that. From what I understand, DEA was merely asking questions of the armored car companies at the time as to what their practices are. I think those questions occurred before the guidance memo was put out, and certainly at the present time, I don't believe there's any effort to instruct the armored car companies not to do anything at this point.
Well, that implication is out there, and I would hope that it get cleared up, because I don't want to see a shootout somewhere and have innocent people or law enforcement endangered by that. So I think there should be specific guidance to the financial services industry or the Treasury Department. Now, you've noted the department generally does not prosecute individuals who are using small amounts of marijuana on private property, which I think is sort of the general attitude of most state prosecutors. They've usually got real problems to deal with and not that. Instead, the department has targeted sophisticated and large-scale drug traffickers. They've relied upon state and local law enforcement to go after lower-level drug activity, although they're usually overwhelmed with things that really affect people. In the wake of the recent guidance, we've heard some concerns the federal government is abdicating all responsibility for enforcing drug laws in Colorado or Washington State, and that the department's decision will lead to free-for-all drug activity in those states. I assume you do not agree with that characterization that Justice Department is abdicating its responsibility for enforcing federal drug laws in those states.
I don't agree with it at all, Mr. Chairman. I think it's quite the contrary. What I think is very clear in our memo is that we are going to aggressively enforce the Controlled Substance Act when it implicates any of the 8 priorities that are listed there. And I think that's a pretty fulsome list of priorities of important public safety issues that are present and associated with marijuana. We expect to continue to enforce in every state whenever that is implicated, whether the state has a state law legalizing it or not. We are not giving immunity. We are not giving a free pass. We are not abdicating our responsibilities. We are dedicating ourselves to enforcing the Controlled Substances Act in regard to marijuana when it implicates those federal priorities.
Are you going to monitor the implementation of the regulatory system in these states?
We will certainly be looking at how they go about implementing it, and we hope that they will be doing it in a full and robust way. But largely how we operate is on a case-by-case basis. And when we see somebody who is marketing marijuana in a way that's going to be attractive to minors, we're going to go after them. If we see somebody who's growing and cultivating marijuana so they can import it or export it out of state, we're going to go after them. If they're involved in drug cartels and illegal enterprises, we're going to go after them.
Now, you said in your testimony the department reserves its right to file a lawsuit challenging the state laws in Colorado and Washington at a later time. The law is clear, of course, that the federal government can't force a state to criminalize a particular type of conduct or activity. So such a lawsuit would have to, challenge the state laws, focusing on the regulatory framework set up by them, but not on question of telling them what they have to criminalize or not criminalize. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chairman Leahy. This was a difficult issue that we had to contend with in deciding whether or not to seek any preemption action here, because it would be a very challenging lawsuit to bring to preempt the state's decriminalization law. We might have an easier time with their regulatory scheme in preemption, but then what you'd have is legalized marijuana and no enforcement mechanism within the state to try and regulate it. And that's probably not a good situation to have.
Kind of an incentive for a black market, isn't it?
Very much so, sir. And money going into organized criminal enterprises instead of going into state tax coffers and having the state regulate from a seed to sale basis what happens to it.
It'd be basically everything the state voted for, you would be trying to overturn.
We would be trying to overturn that, and yet there would still have decriminalization of marijuana, so it would still exist in the state.
Thank you.